In today's drama, a struggling mother comes searching for a father figure for her little boy. But what she finds is a quiet, single dad carrying a heartbreak of his own. What begins as a simple meeting soon turns into an emotional journey of healing, trust, and unexpected love. Before we continue, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Nora Calloway had told herself 3 times on the drive out that she was not doing anything desperate. She was not hunting for a husband. She was not walking into a country charity event hoping some kind stranger would magically step into the shape her son's father had left behind. She was doing one simple thing that mothers had done forever. She was trying to answer a question her child had started asking with his eyes long before he ever said it out loud. Why does everybody else have one? The flyer had been pinned crookedly to a bulletin board outside Eli's speech therapist's office. Saturday Build Days Kids and Caregivers Welcome. Hands-on, mentoring at Mercer Farm. There had been a picture of a child holding a birdhouse and laughing into the shoulder of a man with work-rough hands. That picture had done more damage to Nora's careful pride than she wanted to admit. So she drove. Mercer Farm sat beyond the edge of Cedar Hollow, past the gas station, past the church, past a long stretch of road where the hills opened up and the houses got quiet. It was not polished. It was not charming in the curated way people on social media like to fake. It was real. Fences needed paint. The barn wore its years honestly. The garden rows were neat though, and the porch had children's rain boots lined up beside the door. That detail hit her harder than it should have. A man lived here who remembered where small shoes belonged. Then came the moment at the check-in table, the soft apology, the humiliating misunderstanding, the quick urge to turn around before Eli could understand what was happening. And then Graham Mercer had stepped in. Now, 10 minutes later, Nora stood under the open side of the workshop barn and watched her son listen to a stranger, like the whole world had finally quieted down enough for him to hear. Graham did not talk much. That was the first thing she noticed. He gave Eli simple instructions, never too many at once. He showed him how to hold the wood steady, how to keep his fingers clear, how to tap the nail instead of attacking it. Eli usually hated being corrected. With Graham, he leaned in harder, eyes fixed, mouth slightly open with concentration. It made Nora's chest ache. The 2 little girls from the gravel path stayed close to Graham the whole time. One sat on an upside-down bucket with apple slices in her lap. The other wandered between him and the workbench, always finding some part of his shirt or sleeve to hold. Twins, Nora guessed. 3, maybe 4 years old. Matching brown curls. Matching serious faces. Every now and then, one of them would say, "Daddy, look." And every time, Graham looked. Not halfway, not distracted, fully. That was the second thing Nora noticed. The third was harder to name. It sat somewhere behind his eyes. He was handsome, but not in a polished, easy way. He looked like a man who forgot mirrors existed. Work had shaped him. Loss had too. Even when he smiled at Eli. Even when one of his daughters climbed up into his lap and pressed her cheek against his shoulder, there was something held back in him, like a room in a house with the light turned off and the door shut tight. "Your turn," he said, sliding the hammer toward Eli. Eli looked up. "What if I mess it up?" Graham rested one hand on the wood. "Then we fix it." Eli frowned. "What if I mess it up bad?" For the first time, Graham's expression changed in a way Nora felt rather than saw. "Then we still fix what we can." It was such a small sentence. It landed like something much larger. Nora glanced away, pretending to study the shelves along the far wall. Mason jars, seed packets, a tiny pink raincoat hanging from a hook. Beside it, almost hidden, a framed photograph turned partly toward the wall. Not an accident then. Not forgetfulness. A choice. When she looked back, Eli had driven the nail in crooked. He froze, waiting for disappointment. Graham only shifted the wood, tapped the edge straight with 2 careful hits, and said, "See? Still standing." Eli smiled then. Not the polite little smile he used with adults, Not the strained one Nora had learned to celebrate because it was better than silence. A real one. Sudden, bright, gone too fast, but real. It changed the whole air around them. When the session ended, Nora helped Eli into his jacket while the twins chased each other between hay bales. Graham wiped his hands on a faded towel and walked over carrying a small wooden toy boat, unfinished but smooth around the edges. "For the drive home," he said, offering it to Eli. Eli took it like it was something rare. Then he asked the question children always asked at the worst possible moment. "Are you a real dad?" Nora closed her eyes for half a second. Eli. But Graham didn't flinch. He looked at his daughters, then back at Eli. "Yes," he said quietly. "Every day. I try to be." Eli nodded, as if that answer made perfect sense. Nora looked at Graham, and for the first time, he looked back long enough for something to pass between them. Not comfort, not romance, not yet. Recognition. Two exhausted adults standing on opposite sides of the same emptiness. Then Graham cleared his throat and stepped back. "We do this again next Saturday," he said, "if you want to come." Nora had meant to protect herself, to thank him politely, to leave before hope got ridiculous. Instead, she heard herself say, "We'd like that." By Tuesday, Eli had placed the little wooden boat on his windowsill. Beside the flashlight he slept with, and the jar of polished stones, he never let anyone move. That was how Nora knew the day at Mercer Farm had mattered more than he knew how to explain. He talked about it in fragments. Not about the workshop itself, not really. About the way Graham had shown him how to line up a nail without making him feel small. About the twins whose names turned out to be Ivy and June. About the dog sleeping under the porch. About the smell of cedar and coffee and rain on dirt. Mostly he talked about going back. So the next Saturday, Nora drove them out again. This time, the embarrassment from the first visit was gone, replaced by something more dangerous: anticipation. She hated how quickly her body recognized the place when the farm came into view. The crooked fence, the old windmill beyond the field, the patched barn doors, a place that looked worn in instead of worn out. Graham was outside, splitting kindling when they arrived. His sleeves were rolled up, his forearms dusted with sawdust, his daughters wrapped around his legs like they had been waiting there all morning. June spotted Eli first and ran toward him, curls bouncing. Ivy followed with more caution, carrying a red plastic shovel like it was serious equipment. Eli, who usually needed time with other children, dropped into their little orbit so naturally that Nora stopped in the gravel and simply watched. Then Graham looked up. No smile at first, just that steady, unreadable gaze. And then, slowly, something softened. "You came back," he said. Nora lifted the paper bag in her hand. "I brought blueberry muffins as proof we have manners." His mouth twitched. "That's reassuring." It wasn't much. It shouldn't have been enough to warm her all the way through. Somehow it was. The morning folded around them in small, ordinary pieces. Graham showed Eli and the girls how to sand rough edges off scrap wood to make toy blocks. Nora helped wash brushes at the outdoor sink, then ended up sorting jars in the pantry because no one asked her to, but it felt strange just standing still. Ivy decided within 20 minutes that Nora should help tie her shoe. June decided Nora was allowed to hold her hand. None of it felt dramatic. That was what made it dangerous. Near noon, Graham disappeared into the house to get more paper towels, and Nora followed a minute later when June announced there was juice emergency all over the kitchen table. The house was warm in the practical way of lived-in places. Children's drawings on the fridge, a stack of library books near the sofa, a laundry basket half full on the stairs, not curated, not polished, human. She found the paper towels on the counter beside the same framed photograph she had glimpsed the week before. This time, she saw it clearly. A woman stood in a field with the twins on either side of her. Both babies then, both laughing. She had dark curls, bright eyes, and the kind of smile that made other people lean toward it without realizing. Graham came in behind Nora and stopped when he saw where she was looking. For one stretched second, neither of them spoke. Then he set the clean cups down beside the sink and said, very quietly, her name was Laurel. Nora turned. I'm sorry. He nodded once, like he had heard the words too many times, and still didn't know where to put them. It was 2 years ago. Sudden. One day we were arguing about paint samples for the girls' room, and 3 days later, he swallowed. I kept thinking the house would remember how to sound like itself. It didn't. Nora looked at the photograph again, then back at him. That's why you started the build days? His eyes flicked toward the window, where Eli was laughing with the twins by the rain barrel. Laurel used to say kids deserve at least one adult who looks them in the eye and means what they say. He gave a faint, humorless smile. I wasn't doing a great job surviving. This gave me somewhere to put my hands. There it was again, that shut room behind his eyes. Not coldness, grief, still living in the walls. Nora had not meant to tell him anything real in return, but standing in that kitchen, with the photo between them and the children just outside, it felt impossible to stay hidden. Eli's father left before he was born, she said. Not in a dramatic way, not even in an honest way. He just kept promising to show up until I got tired of helping him lie. She folded the damp towel once, then again. I didn't come here looking for romance. I came because my son started asking questions I couldn't answer by myself. Graham looked at her then, fully. I know. That simple answer did something to the air. Outside, a school bus rolled slowly past the road beyond the fence. Eli, hearing it, suddenly abandoned the rain barrel and ran toward the porch with the paper flyer he had taken from the workshop wall. Mom, he said, breathless. Then he looked at Graham. Next Friday is the family build night at school. Nora froze. She already knew what was coming. Eli held the flyer tighter. You can only bring a parent. He looked up at Graham with that brave, careful hope children used when they had already been disappointed before. Would you come with me? Silence filled the kitchen. June reached for Graham's hand. Ivy leaned against his leg. Nora's face went hot. Eli, honey, that's not... But Graham didn't look at her. He looked at Eli like the question had reached somewhere deep and unfinished inside him. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and unsteady, in a way she had not heard before. Nora, he said, eyes still on the boy. If I say yes to that, I don't know how to do it halfway. Nora should have said no. Not because Eli had done anything wrong, not because Graham had crossed a line, but because she knew how quickly children could turn a kind moment into a future they believed in with their whole bodies. She had spent years managing hope carefully, trimming it back before it grew teeth. Yet when she looked at Eli's face, and then at Graham's, she understood what Graham had meant. Halfway would be the cruel version. So she took a breath and answered with the only honesty she had. Then don't do it halfway, she said. The school's family build night was held in the elementary gym, under fluorescent lights that made everything look flatter than it felt. Folding tables had been arranged in long rows, each one set with cheap pine kits, sandpaper, plastic cups of screws, and instruction sheets no child was going to read. Parents drifted in with coffee tumblers and backpacks and tired smiles. Some came in pairs. Most didn't. Eli stood so close to Graham on the walk-in that his jacket brushed against Graham's leg every few steps. Nora noticed everything. The way Graham slowed down without making it obvious. The way he let Eli carry the supply box, though he had quietly shifted the heavier side toward his own hand. The way Ivy and June, who had come too, reached for Nora without asking, as if the shape of the evening already made sense to them. Then came the moment Nora had feared. A volunteer at the sign-in table smiled down at Eli, then looked up at Graham and said, "You can put Dad's name right here." The room did not freeze. No music stopped. No one turned to stare. But Nora felt Eli's body go very still. She opened her mouth, ready to rescue him from the awkwardness. But Graham spoke first. "My name goes here," he said gently, taking the clipboard. "And hers goes beside it. Eli's lucky enough to have 2 adults who showed up tonight." The woman smiled. slightly flustered, and nodded. Of course. That was all. But Eli looked up at Graham as if he had just been handed something fragile and enormous. At their table, the first 10 minutes went badly. The pieces didn't line up. June got impatient and knocked over the screws. Ivy wanted to use the tiny paint pots before anything was assembled. Eli misread an instruction, forced a panel the wrong way, and when the wood cracked at the edge, he dropped the whole thing like it had betrayed him. Nora saw the panic rise in him immediately. The old shame, the certainty that one mistake meant he had ruined the entire evening. She started toward him, but Graham got there first. He didn't rush, didn't overtalk. He crouched until he was eye level with Eli and set the broken piece between them on the table. "You remember what I told you?" he asked. Eli's face was tight. "I messed it up bad." Graham nodded once, maybe. Eli blinked fast, trying not to cry. Then Graham ran his thumb over the crack and said, "Good thing bad isn't the same as finished." Something loosened in the boy's shoulders. Together, they adjusted the design. Graham showed him how to brace the weak side with a spare strip of wood. Nora steadied the base. Ivy solemnly handed over screws one by one. June painted a single blue line across the roof and declared it important. By the end of the night, the birdhouse leaned a little to the left. The paint was uneven. One side was brighter than the other, because the girls had insisted on using all the yellow. It was perfect. On the drive back, the twins fell asleep in the back seat before they even reached the county road. Their heads tilted toward each other. Eli fought sleep longer, clutching the crooked birdhouse in his lap. "Did I do okay?" he asked softly. Graham glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "You stayed with it. That matters more." Eli nodded, satisfied, and drifted off a minute later. Nora and Graham sat in the quiet driveway outside her small rental house for a long moment after the engine stopped. Porch light on, night insects humming. A dish towel still hanging crookedly in the kitchen window because she had left in a rush. For once, the silence between them did not feel empty. "I almost said no," Nora admitted. Graham kept his hands resting on the steering wheel. "I know. I wasn't sure if I was protecting him," she said, looking toward the sleeping shape of her son, "or just protecting myself." He turned then, not all the way, just enough that she could see the tired honesty in his face. "I wasn't sure either." That made her laugh, quiet and surprised. Then he said the thing she had been feeling all evening and trying not to name. "I don't want to be a borrowed shape in your son's life, Nora." Her breath caught. He looked down once, then back at her. No performance, no polished line, just a man telling the truth before he lost the nerve. "And I don't want you walking into my house just because my girls have started looking for you when they hear a car pull up." He paused. "So if we keep doing this, I'd rather do it honestly." Nora studied him in the dim light. The grief was still there. So was hers. Neither of them had become easier people just because one warm evening had gone well. But honesty had its own kind of romance. Slow, unadorned, strong enough to build on. "What does honestly look like?" she asked. Graham's mouth softened into the smallest smile. "Dinner on Sunday," he said. "All of us. Burnt grilled cheese is possible. Emotional overthinking is guaranteed." She smiled before she could stop herself. "That sounds suspiciously like a threat." "It's the best offer I've got." When she finally stepped out of the truck, he walked her to the porch carrying the sleeping twins, one on each shoulder, while she lifted Eli from the back seat. For a few quiet seconds they stood there, in the warm pool of light, all four children heavy with sleep, the night wrapped softly around them. No promises were spoken. None were needed yet. Inside the house, Nora set the crooked birdhouse on the kitchen table. Through the window, she watched Graham cross the yard with the girls still tucked against him, moving slowly so they wouldn't wake. Halfway to the truck, he looked back. Not to make sure she was watching, just because he wanted to. And for the first time in a long while, the future did not feel like an empty room. It felt like a porch light left on, a seat held open, and the faint, steady sound of someone choosing to stay.